Good afternoon and welcome to the joint session on e-invoicing, a new and safer way to invoice with Business Station, the Australian Tax Office today. Thank you for all of you who are joining us on the webinar today. We'll be going through two presentations, one from the Australian Tax Office and one from Digital Solutions around cybersecurity with invoicing. And thank you to everyone who came to the live event at Brisbane's Business Hub in the centre of Brisbane. I must admit we're a little challenged today because we actually, there's a protest on today, so there's a very limited parking. So if you're watching back the recording because you didn't make it into the hub today, I'm really sorry, and please just send us in your questions later, okay? We were really hoping that you would get here today. So I'm going to welcome the first speaker, Rebecca, who is an amazing presenter from the Australian Tax Office and is going to introduce you to a new system that the ATO is launching, and hoping that we're all going to register for that today. So I'm going to bring on Rebecca, and then at the end of Rebecca's presentation, we'll take questions. So just if you're on the webinar, if you're in the room, just raise your hand at the end. But if you're on the webinar, please ask you that in this webinar style format, you're going to find that you don't have a microphone button or a video button. That's totally the way it's meant to be. There is a menu option called Q&A. If you could please write your questions in the Q&A section, and we'll ask them at the end of Rebecca's presentation for Rebecca's content, and then at the end of mine for that. Thanks, guys. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you, Robin. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming along today and for tuning in as well. Welcome to you online. I was just telling Andrew before, I have a tendency to go off script. So I've promised myself to stick to my script and my lines today. Ask all the context and questions till the end. I will absolutely do my best to stick to this time today. So e-invoicing happens to be something that I live and breathe at the moment. It is my favourite topic, and I hope to, my job is to raise awareness of e-invoicing for small business across Australia. So thank you very much for tuning in. You may not be aware, but you are actually a part of e-invoicing week. So this is one of the very many events that are happening throughout this week until the 21st. Where we're showcasing stories and case studies and testimonials of people already using e-invoicing and realising the benefits, demonstrations by software providers, which is something that will be really valuable to those people who are visual learners like myself, and a variety of information sessions from a range of businesses and software providers. So I'll let you know at the end how to get involved a little more in e-invoicing week. But today I'm going to take you through what e-invoicing is and what it isn't, the drivers, the benefits, the ATO's role, and some context in terms of the rollout of the initiative within Australia, and some information on how to get started. So before I dive into what e-invoicing is, let's look at the drivers for adoption. So often we go with the what first and then the why, but I'm actually starting with the why. I think I've just, no. Yes, it is the slide that I wanted. Thank you so much. Sorry, I thought that I pressed on this.
Yeah.
Oh, I did. Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to start with the why. Which is important when it comes to me explaining the ATO's role. So firstly, we know there's been an absolute eye-watering increase in business scams and fraud. You can see on the slide in front of you there, that is information from the ACCC's targeting scam report from 2021. Up from 128 million is 227 million. Lost to payment redirection scams and fraud, sorry. And most of those who lost that 227 million, I'm sure will be of no surprise to you, but belongs to small business or belonged to small business. One of the causes or one of the reasons for that is the security measures that small business do or don't have in place, which is something that I'll address with the benefits of e-invoicing. We're we're in the middle of 2022 and more than $10 million has been lost to false billing scams. So in that payment redirection scam, there's a type of scam, business impersonation scams, false billing scams, which is where scammers impersonate a business's known supplier, sends a genuine looking invoice via an email requesting the payment with the bank details, and of course that new or fraudster person gets paid by the business into a fraudulent account. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago with an organisation called ID Care. They're a not-for-profit who support small businesses to recover from invoice scams, email scams. And one of the astounding stats that they shared was, of that 227 million or whatever amount it happens to be, less than 5% of that is recovered. Now, I know that in terms of credit card fraud, if you or your neighbour has been subject to this and you've lost money, generally you get the money back, right? But I can tell you that the banks don't. So less than 5% of that 225 million is recovered back. That is a huge loss to the economy. One of the drivers. Then we're looking at the high cost of manual processing. So if we're, according to Deloitte Access Economics, there are over 1.2 billion invoices sent annually in Australia, most of which are sent by emails and PDF attachments. 89% of those emails and invoices received are processed manually. 1.2 billion emails, generally emails, invoices, almost 90% of those manually processed. That is, that's a cost to small business. And while we're on the topic of cost access, Deloitte Access Economics did some research, and they said that the average cost of sending a paper invoice in Australia by paper or PDF is around $30. 1.2 billion times $30 equals a lot of billions as far as I'm concerned. That's obviously one of those drivers there, is the cost of small business in terms of that processing. And finally, late payments, which of course goes to cash flow for small business. Late payments, it's a common issue when you're sending a PDF through email. You are perhaps, checking, correcting errors. Perhaps you are, someone hasn't received that invoice. You're chasing up for payment, that sort of thing. Correcting those errors is a huge cost to business. And the greatest thing for me here is, in terms of benefits, and I know that I might be jumping ahead of myself, but is the improved relationships by not having to chase your suppliers, your trading partners for payments with those lost invoices. I'm just checking that I'm covering everything in my notes and my tangents aren't taking me too far away from what I'm supposed to be doing here. So now can I have the next slide, please? So now we're going to talk about what e-invoicing actually is. So e-invoicing, we like to use analogies when we explain what something is. I've said before, I'm a pretty visual learner, so I love the analogies. So of course I'm not sticking to my notes is what I'm not doing. So many people do believe that what they are doing, and I've spoken to George today, who's in the room with us, many people believe that they are already e-invoicing because they are something. It's electronic, right? We've got that PDF that's attached or created in a system. We attach it to an email, and we send it off, so we think they're already invoicing. It's a manually intensive process. Here's my analogy. So I'm going to use the payment evolution analogy. So in the payment space, we went from checks to online banking to real-time payment real-time contactless payments. I'm not going to say that 3 times fast. I can't even say it once. Whereas with the business automation, and this is where e-invoicing sits, we'll be going from paper to PDF, email to e-invoicing. So this is e-invoicing is the next step in terms of sending invoices in that business automation transformation. So e-invoicing is, as you can see on the screen, the new standardised way to send and receive business invoices via a secure network, which I'll go into in a minute around that network. The exchange is directly between a buyer and supplier's accounting systems. So regardless of what software you're using, I'm using Xero, you're using Rekey or MyOb or whomever, it doesn't matter what software platform you're using, it goes directly from my system into yours. The other thing I think to point out, and this is a bit of a tangent, but it is at the moment business to business and business to government. This isn't business to client. Never say never, but at the moment, this is not business to customer. So I'm not going to the hairdresser, getting my hair done and expecting to transact through e-invoicing. This is business to business and business to government. So we've got the invoice showing up automatically in the accounting software, ready to be approved and paid. So this is just another channel. It is the standard that is part of that secure network that is what makes e-invoicing different. So if we look at the top image in this slide, you've got the current state where information is created as data, converted into a flat file of some sort, which is generally a PDF. It's then sent to the receiver, it's converted into data for manual entry or scanning, depending on how large that your business is. With invoicing, have a look at that bottom slide, that bottom picture there, it's data all the way through. It's digital. So practically, it's a new channel in your software. How you generate invoices now won't change. Some software providers have developed efficiencies around their e-invoicing functionality, but you'll raise an invoice in the same way that you do now, but you'll send it through send it as an e-invoice. So when you e-invoice, you use the ABN as the destination address, not the email as the destination address. And remember, it's going through that secure network. You'll still retain control over the approval process. This is simply about how you send and receive the invoice. That payment process still, whatever sits in place, will remain. So it's eliminating email, which if we go back to those stats and, you know, that manual process and all that sort of stuff, it is, I'm not going to say eliminate because scammers and fraudsters will always find a way, won't they? But because it's in that secure network, it is significantly reducing the exposure to those business impersonation scams. The benefits, thank you so much for being so proactive. So the security, the privacy, the security effort, that reliability and security, it's going through that secure network. So e-invoicing can save you time, and we think about a receiver of an invoice, the time that you spend in data entry it vanishes. It's like magic. It just shows up in your system, ready for you to pay. Of course, it doesn't eliminate all areas, but it is coming through that secure network. It's coming through with all the relevant information to the right person. There's that time and effort and the reliability and the security. The faster payments boosting cash flow. Faster payments is obviously real-time data showing up, so you've got the information there ready to go, ready to pay, right? The other thing in terms of that faster payments is if you are trading with federal government, federal government has a 5-day payment time. If you send a correctly rendered e-invoice to a federal government department, you will be paid your invoice within 5 days, which is definitely an incentive for those who trade with federal governments to hop on the e-invoicing train. And of course, it's better for the environment. So you think about the ink cartridges and the paper and the storage space of your big printers and scanners and that sort of stuff. That's all eliminated. So if we can go, thank you very much. This is my favourite slide because this is actually the most frequently asked question that we get is, why is the ATO involved? Why is the government doing this? What, you know, when we are asked this question, it's normally because people think that the ATO can see that invoice data and compliance comes to mind, right? Well, fortunately, that is not the case with e-invoicing. Our role, our being the ATO, our role is to oversee the international standard and the network that's been adopted by the Australian government, which is called PEPL. Our job primarily is to accredit the software providers to deliver e-invoicing services to Australia and make sure that they implement that standard consistently so that the software products can talk to each other without any problem. So within the PEPL framework, that international standard, it has also been adopted in this region in New South Wales, New Zealand, Singapore, and now Japan, and obviously Australia as well. So in every jurisdiction that uses PEPL, which is the standard, there is a PEPL authority to manage the network in that jurisdiction. And in Australia, that's the Australian Taxation Office. So we're primarily our role is governance, which we are very good at. If you have a look at the right hand of that side, we think of single touch payroll, we think JobKeeper, we think, you know, we've done a pretty good job over the last few years in proving ourselves as being able to deliver on pretty large scale government initiatives. But primarily our role is governance and driving e-invoicing adoption. So the software providers use the network that we provide governance for, we the ATO, that doesn't connect to the ATO at any point in that invoice exchange. We can't see the data. What can we see? What we can see, or what the those access points are required to report to us, is the number of invoices that are sent through them and the number of invoices that are received. That's as far as the legislation allows us, and also the infrastructure. We just don't have the infrastructure to see that granular level of data. So one of the questions that comes through around this is, oh, well, you'll have the data there so you can pre-fill my tax return. Well, that would be very nice, but we don't have access to that data. So, but what it does do is it positions you to be able to save time so that you're able to manage your tax and super affairs effectively. Thanks. So just a little bit of background in terms of the progress and why I'm here today and why we've got e-invoicing week. So in July 2022, so this year, federal government were mandated to receive e-invoices. So there's a mandate. We've got state governments adopting. New South Wales are using it, South Australia as well. A couple of local governments have been enabled. We've got some large businesses, Bunnings, BOC Gas. There are some large businesses in the energy sector, retail sector. I'm not allowed to say names, but just draw your own conclusions. There are some large businesses who are adopting and have adopted this. So what we're trying to do is raise awareness for small business, for yourselves, so that we're not in a position, or you're not in a position where large businesses forcing this. But this is ultimately what will happen. We've got over 18,000 registrations. In fact, it's 18,700 and something as at the start of this week. Most of that is small business. the big kicker at the moment, the business, the major accounting software providers are ready. They have their products ready and available. So for those of you using, let's just say the big four, you can e-invoice now for free. So if we can, oh, and of course, the awareness is ramping up. So if we can just go to the next slide, please. I'm being wrapped up. So I really want to let you know how to get started. Get ready, have a think about, is e-invoicing for you right now? What is your invoice quantity? Is that security measure impetus enough for you to say, do you know what? My invoices might only be 10 a month, but they're about 60 grand each. That's not, I don't want to be putting myself at risk. And I was talking about scams and small business, that 217 million. Most of that is small business. That is due to the lack of security measures in place by small business. This is one of the things that you guys can do for yourself in terms of that security aspect, as well as saving you time and money. Register through your software provider. It is very easy. It is about 2 or 3 minutes, that process. I've seen it done. It is super quick. And then, of course, get started. Now, as I said, most of the big four, all of the big four have got this service offering, most of them for free. If you do not use software to invoice at the moment, there are some low and no cost solutions. There are web portals out there for you, depending on the quantity of invoices that you exchange. Some of them are free. And of course, I did not stick to my slides at all, and I'm wrapping up now. So I just want to make sure that I've covered everything for you. I think I'll send to Andrew and to Agatha some links for you at the end, just so you've got access to all the information you could possibly need in order to get started on your e-invoicing journey. I might hand over for a Q&A. Is there, have there been any questions that have come through? I'm happy to take questions. Excellent.
First one, is this similar to the invoice I received directly from my council?
So the question for those of you at home, is e-invoicing the same as the invoice I received to pay my council rates? I know we're in Brisbane. I am not a rate payer, so I actually don't know how you receive your rates. If you are receiving that through a portal, or are you receiving by paper? So the answer to your question is no. Unless you have registered yourself, you will know if you are invoicing, because you need to register yourself through that with your ABN. And I think secondary to that is, remember I said before, it's actually at the moment business to business. That's not to say that the person asking that question isn't a business, because they may very well be. The local, what I can tell you is Brisbane Local Council are not yet e-invoicing ready, so it's unlikely that you will have received an e-invoice through them. But there are local councils that are, you know, coming on board, so it will be just a matter of time. So the answer to your question is probably no. Your rates, yeah, absolutely. Call your local council and check wherever you are in Brisbane. Oh gosh, I'm in Brisbane. You're not in Brisbane. You could be anywhere. It depends how you get your invoices. If you're in New South Wales, it may actually be the case that you are receiving an invoice. But I would suggest that you would know that you have a that you've received an invoice, because you'd be registered.
So another question: can we assume that the other government agencies funding, for example, who transact in this way? In other words, is it likely to automatically invoice and return?
Yes. So essentially that question for you guys playing at home was, can we assume that other government departments will start sending e-invoices? And the answer to that is yes. The specific example that was called out there was ASIC. I'm not entirely sure of their position at the moment. ASIC are enabled. There you go. Thank you, Cassandra, my colleague at the back of the room. ASIC are enabled, yes. So the answer to that question is absolutely yes. But remember too that you need to be registered in order for them to ASIC can receive e-invoices. They may not be set up to send at the moment. The legislation just allows for federal government departments to be set up to receive e-invoices. But the answer is ultimately yes. This is the next step. We were talking about that evolution. This is the next step. Next question. Thank you. See, this is in my notes. I'm so pleased. Thank you. The question was, is e-invoicing mandatory? For small business, the answer is no. The answer is no right now. Earlier this year, the Treasury did some consultation with small business, with business in general, about what a mandate might look like, and whether that looks like a mandate for large business. But if you're trading with large business and that's the way that they operate, then of course you would be required, in order to retain that contract with that large business, it would be expected that you would you would need to e-invoice. So this is what I'm saying. I'm here to raise awareness. I want you to get online and have a look at some of the information, really try and wrap your head around this. You will start hearing. E-invoicing week is just the start. We hope to continue this momentum. You will continue to hear about this, and if anyone in this network is wanting to be e-invoicing champions, I would love that. We would love that. You know, those early adopters out there, we would absolutely love for you to get on board. Tell us what your experience was, what the savings and what the benefits are for you. That helps us tell the story, that helps us raise awareness. So I hope that answered the question, because, you know, tangents, I love them. Are there any more questions? Do we have time? Okay, one more.
Okay, one quick one. Do you have any recommendations for invoicing international?
Do I have any recommendations for e-invoicing international businesses? The good news is with this standard, the PEPL standard, e-invoicing, you can actually transact with international businesses, so long as they are registered on the PEPL network as well. So if you do have trading partners who are overseas, then just check, and they're invoicing. I'm going to suggest that that conversation has already been had, or will certainly start to be had, as other businesses who transact with PEPL understand that Australia has adopted, and that momentum is you know, taking pace within Australia. Do I have a recommendation? Can you just read that question out to me again? Because I want to make sure that I answer it properly.
Any recommendation for invoicing international business?
Any recommendation for invoicing international business? I think I'll leave that there. If you think of the network as being governed by the Australian PEPL Authority, which is the tax office, and then you've got all the users who are the MyObs and the Zeros and the software providers and the third-party plugins and everybody else who's using that network, they are the ones who are providing that service to you. So it will depend on your business model and your business needs as to what product or service you actually use. So I don't have a recommendation for a specific product. I'm also not allowed to recommend because I come from the ATO. But that would be my answer. Is it's very much going to depend on you and your needs. How are we going? Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining and tuning in online. I hope that we can. Yes, absolutely. We will. I'll step away. That's all. We've got another.
Yes, sorry.
So rude of us not to address the people in the actual room. When I'm talking about the Big Four, I'm talking, the question in the room was, I've been talking about the Big Four, what about the other banks? When I'm talking about the Big Four, I'm actually talking about MyOb and Xero and the Big Four software providers. Yes. No, not banks, not in this context. Yes, thank you, George. Yes, yes, absolutely. Yes. So I think, so the question was, a lot of businesses are moving to cyber, so they're digitising their business automation, and does e-invoicing fit into that? E-invoicing fits into that beautifully. It is perfectly in that space. It is an automation tool using a secure network. So in terms of security, which is it sounds to me, you know, what you were getting at then, people are moving over to these platforms for that added security, or certainly putting security measures in place once they do move over. Yes, the security benefits are, if we're comparing to email and PDF, in my opinion, it's just a no-brainer. But yes, it's absolutely, it speaks to that security. Any other questions in the room? No. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yay. Thank you, Rebecca. All right. Now for everybody here and online, obviously the original time slot for this was 30 minutes for the webinar, and we totally smashed that. So I'm very grateful that Rebecca was able to go through everything in a lot of detail for you and explain the background and where it's coming from and answer those very important questions about whether it's mandatory and all the rest. We are going to keep going. Sorry, I do have a clicker. No, it doesn't work. I was going to click. So just pause there. So obviously the website to go to, if now or later, is ato.gov.au/e-invoicing. Otherwise, go to the tax office website and put e-invoicing in the search bar. Either will get you there and it'll explain everything in more detail. All right, we are running longer than anticipated. We're going to keep going. I will just remind everyone that if you're registered for anything today, you will receive a recording of the event. So if you do have to leave early because you have other work commitments or other meetings, please do so. It's fine. You can send questions in later as well. Okay. All right, so we're going to do a little bit on cybersecurity now, which obviously pairs in very nicely with e-invoicing, of course. How can you talk about the importance of e-invoicing and securely transferring transactions of money over a network without saying exactly how it fits into the rest of your business? So my name is Runward Lerner, and I am a very passionate advocate for Business Station and the Digital Solutions program, who is represented here today. Digital Solutions is a federal government program that Business Station has the absolute privilege to provide for you across Queensland, Northern Territory and Western Australia. And we'll talk about that right at the end, okay? Now, we may run out of time for questions at the end today, but I'll certainly take as many as I can, okay? So weird not being able to forward my own slides. I'm going to go through this as quick as possible, though. I love this quote because I think it puts it in very much perspective, right? The head of FBI, or the former director of the FBI, says there are only two types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. It puts things in perspective, right? It's not a matter of whether you might be in the firing lane. It's really a matter of whether you are going to be attempted an attack now or later. And last year's report from the annual threat report from the Australian Cybersecurity Centre says that self-reported cyber attacks lost us $33 billion to our economy. That is not a small figure at all. So we talk about invoicing scams as a part of that, but there is a bigger part of that in the sense that fraud was nearly 40% of this. So intercepting payment details. Identity crime was the second largest. So this is absolutely where it's at. And I tell you what, small business is not under the radar, it's targeted. And we've just come out of a pandemic where countries all over the world are not as you know, how do we say it, lucky as us, that we have this wonderful government system that supports us when the chips, you know, our luck is down and we are without an income. There are many countries around the world and many places and many people around the world, here and overseas, that have been without an income for an extended period of time. And when you think about it in that context, you can think about how easy it is for someone to go, I literally have no other resort than to do something like cybercrime. And when I look around the world at who I could target, small business are absolutely thinking they're not looked at, not considered, not targeted. But actually the average executed cybercrime on things like invoicing and payment interception is about $50,600 per issue, which is up, I think, 150% or something on the year before. Like, it's massive, right? So what are the different types of attacks? Now, Rebecca did go a little bit through this, which is great. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. There is another webinar coming up later, I think next month, on cybersecurity for small business you can get on board with. But just very quickly, these are kind of the ones that do relate to things like invoicing. So phishing with a PH is a very commonly known one, but if you haven't heard of it, it's where basically an organization, a person, an individual, a perpetrator will try and mimic some sort of email that you would think, oh, this looks right. And actually it's from someone trying to scam information from you. It could be trying to mimic a real invoice. It could be trying to mimic a real company. And there's certain things you can look out for, which I'll go through in a minute. Ransomware is where either through phishing or other means, they get into your computer or your network through one of your endpoints, like a node or a device, even just mechanical equipment you have in your business that uses smart chips, things like that, can penetrate your business. And what ransomware does, again, looking at a financial gain, they basically encrypt everything in your network or your computer so you can't access anything to do with your workplace or business. And I don't know about you, but I couldn't even operate for like a day without my laptop, let alone having myself locked out. And what they do is request that you pay a sizable amount that they feel is within your means, that you would just pay it, right? There's also other malicious programs to try and shut things down, cause disruption. There's unauthorized access. So even for your bookkeeping program, if you've ever hired a bookkeeper, if you've ever had someone in your organization working your bookkeeping for you, when they left, how quickly did you change their password access or exit them from the program? It's just simple stuff like that sometimes, making sure that there's no one attached to your business that shouldn't have any kind of access anymore. And then man in the middle, or woman in the middle, I'm going to say, is where, for example, you might send an email on a Friday afternoon. You've done, it's end of the week. I'm doing all my invoicing. I'm sending everything via email. No problem. Well, that gives a perpetrator all weekend to play with your email until someone sees it on a Monday morning, right? That's where they intercept it, they change it, and they send it on like nothing happened. And you get your invoice and you think, oh, the numbers look a little bit different. They've probably changed their account. It'll be fine. And then $20,000 is out of your business somewhere else, right? So there are different types. So when you are attacked, it's not a small thing. It's not just about losing the money on the invoice. It can actually go further than that. So for instance, if you're locked out of your business, you've got loss of income. But also if you have staff, if you have customers relying on you, you're also affecting them directly as well, right? So imagine if your staff didn't receive any wages for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, right? How do they pay their own bills? How do they eat? How do they feed their kids? But also you can face fines and civil action. So in Australia, we have legislation to make sure that that you as a business owner are absolutely responsible, same as we have Corporations Act and that to make sure we're responsible. And those kinds of legislation say, you know what, if you don't protect yourself properly, if you don't protect your personal information of your customers properly, you don't secure that data, you don't lock that stuff down, then we're going to fine you maybe, I don't know, 400,000, 2 million. What do we feel like today? It's not small. So quite often, actually, there's some statistics coming out of family business surveys and that pretty much I think over 60% of businesses pretty much close their doors within 6 months of a cyber attack, right? So why wouldn't you do something like e-invoicing to make it more secure? So let's specifically look at invoice scamming, okay? And I know we did talk a little bit about this, so I apologize if there's a bit of repetition. But invoice scamming, like I said, the average is quite large these days. But invoice fraud is a kind of what we call business email compromise quite often. And this kind of results in amazing payouts for someone in as a cyber scammer, right? Great business for them, no problem. But if you're in the business of sending hundreds or even thousands of invoices a month, it's very easy to sneak in a fraudulent invoice or a fraudulent email. So this used to be called man in the middle, but now it's absolutely business email compromise. It's got its own term now. And it's the idea of tricking people to make it look like this is a real invoice. So what might be indicators that it's not real? It'd be things like how it works. So if you're a client of a business, some things you want to look out for is that it looks like a real invoice, but it's got different bank details. It looks like a real invoice, but it's coming into an email account in your business that you don't usually use for invoicing and accounts, right? I get those regularly for my website hosting. Like, they keep trying, bless them. And the one that I experience actually is just like the second one there, where you've got to check your email addresses. So when they use a Gmail account, and we all love Gmail, we all love Google, free and easy. It's also free and easy for cyber attackers to send to make up hundreds of emails a day. And so that's an easy indicator. But now they're getting clever. They might register a domain name that's just one letter off the real thing. Okay. And further to that, you guys should know that if you, I think most people would have a website here, I would say, pretty much 90% of you. Just on a side note, do keep in mind that at the moment in Australia, we are about to launch the .au domain address tail. So you might have a .com, or you might have a .com.au. If you have the .com.au for your business, you need to go on and register with AUDA before September 20th to pre-claim your .au tail, because if you don't, someone else will. Basically, that's the reality of it. So even if you are still deciding whether to have that ending, it doesn't matter. As a business owner and responsible operator with your website, you should go and claim it. Same as your .com, .com.au, have all three and just direct them to the one website. You don't need three websites. Other things to look out for is a PDF where they change the account numbers. They might ask you for PII, which is personally identifiable information. So you know how someone might call you up and go, I just need to check some details with you before we speak. I'm like, well, sometimes I want to throw that question back at them. Well, hang on, you called me. How about I check your details first? Why don't you tell me where you're from? You're calling from a mobile number. Thank you very much, because you're all working from home now. So personally identifiable information, you know, a responsible business would never ask you for that stuff. They'd never ask you to repeat passwords and your mother's maiden name and your first pet and your first school and all that kind of stuff, and details for personal addresses. The invoices for something you didn't purchase. Does anybody get those SMSs like you've got a parcel? Yeah, I think everyone's probably had that now. Yeah, we kind of tend to recognize them, but the first time you get it, you go, oh, do I have a parcel? That's amazing. Oh, I've won $1,000. I've won a new Samsung phone, right? If you didn't put your name down for something, it's not real. There are no genies out there. The email includes suspicious links, of course. So I don't know if you know this, but when you hover your mouse over a link, in the very, very bottom left-hand corner of your screen, it'll show what the link is actually going to go to before you click on it, right? It shows you the link. So if the very, very first part of that link shows the real website address of the company it's from, chances are it's pretty good. If it's like, I don't know, GoDaddy I'm a scammer.com, probably not real, right? So whatever comes just before the .com or just before the .net or just before the .au, whatever it is, that's the host website address. Poor English and grammar, I think we know to see those kind of things. Originates from businesses you don't recognize. What else is there? Oh, pressuring you to pay immediately. You need to pay it today. Don't even look at the email, just pay it. Yes. It comes from a trusted source and it looks right, but there's something in the email that doesn't match what you've got on file. Always it takes precedence to go and check. And of course, it takes you to a landing page and so that I can click on my computer. All right, so as a business operator, things to look for is emails, red flags, be like the logo is a little bit fuzzy, yeah? Because even I know with my very, very basic graphic design skills, I can go onto a website, I can borrow someone's logo and I can slap it into something. I happen to do that all the time because I'm constantly making slides and things with combination of organizations, right? But if I can do it with my limited skills, so can they. They can copy emails, they can copy formats, everything. Some of this is the same. One of the things that invoices are for very, very crisp amounts, like $26,000. I think, well, do we do many invoices for that? Probably not. It's usually like a bit of a mix of things. Also, they never ask you, don't give out any personal information. Okay, sorry. And keep your business information safe. So If anybody's asking you to confirm details, make sure you double check who they are. I know this is kind of, it's a bit same, isn't it? But at the same time, it's kind of the same on both sides. But other things might be, you know, where you get invoices that are duplicates. So you think, I've already paid this, but then you see it come through again, right? So always run things through accounts, a bookkeeper, whoever can check you. One thing I'll just reiterate, I know some of you probably go, you know what? I don't put payment details on an invoice. I just call them up and get credit details over the phone. That's actually illegal in Australia. Don't do that. So consider the e-invoicing option. Might be a good way to go. So how can you avoid being scammed? All right, so this is where we get into the juicy bits, which is I'm sure what you want to know. Three-way matching. So three-way matching is where, you know, when a business might have a purchase order, the invoice, the remittance and bias, things like that, you know, an order form, make sure that they do actually match. And also if you see invoices come through, if you know your organization has like a maximum, and then it clocks over into some sort of second check, do you know what I mean? Like a bureaucratic process where it's like, oh, it's over $1,000, I have to confirm it with accounts. Then you might see invoices come through for like $999.98, just to do the maximum they can without having to have it checked, right? Things like that. So watch your invoice amounts. Make sure you store your supplier details. So if you are regularly paying the same organizations for payments, then make sure you actually save them with your bank or your payment system so that you already have the secured, double-checked, triple-checked payment details, invoice details, company details already in your system so that you know you can double-check it. So if there's a change, you would contact the company directly and ask them if they've had a change. Make sure you check your vendors. So banking details, where am I? Also pay ID, have I got pay ID there? So pay ID is another thing you can do with your bank where basically you submit some additional information like your business email or ABN. So it has to be, and then you set up pay ID so you can have like a one-click payment system. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with that today. Vendors might be from fake business names or fake business, real business name with bogus account details, or it can actually be a real business name with everything correct. But it might be a red flag where the business doesn't come up on Google Maps. You can't find it anywhere. I find ABN lookup. So if you just Google ABN lookup, you can always double check if ABN numbers and businesses and everything match up. It's also monitor your invoice, your tracking activity, and fuzzy matching. So fuzzy matching is a bit of a weird term, yeah, which basically means that your invoicing program can go through and check for like invoices that are so closely identical, right? So if you're doing a lot of invoicing and you're having invoices that come in that look very, very close, your program can pick that up and go, we've got an alert for an almost identical match, right? Get some automation, we're going to continue. So how do you avoid being impersonated? Make sure you use two-factor authentication on all your programs. If you don't know what that means, if you ever go into your bank and then it sends a code to your phone and then you put in that's what two-factor or multi-factor authentication is. There is actually a great Australian program called Bank Vault that's been going for a little while that actually avoids even typing anything into your computer. And that's taking off at the moment. That's a WA-based business. That's bankvault.com, I think. Google it. Make sure you educate your customers on exactly what your payment and invoicing process is. So if you are using e-invoicing and they are using invoicing, that's a great way to check that and go, great, we're just going to send direct. We don't even have to have the rest of the conversation. It's just going to go from my bookkeeping software to your bookkeeping software. Make sure you do cybersecurity training, awareness training with all your staff. It sounds really simple, but I've literally been in organizations where I've seen people huddled around a desk. I'm like, what are you doing? They're like, nothing. And I come back an hour, they're still huddled. What are you doing? Oh, we thought there was an email from the ATO. I'm sure you get a lot. And I couldn't open it. So I forwarded it to my coworker to open it, and she's managed to open it. And we've let a virus into our mainframe. We're trying to get rid of it. Are either of you IT trained? No. Then I suspect we're going to call the boss, right? So even just telling your staff what to do if something happens, very, very important. Set up your e-invoicing to reduce third-party interception. Set up your pay ID with your bank. Ensure your communication, if for any changes, is direct with your customers, verbally if possible. Don't, it's logical. Don't send an email blast telling people your banking details have changed, right? And make sure that you're using some sort of back-end programs to monitor your network. Make sure there's no other people or perpetrators just hanging out in your network waiting for a juicy invoice to go through. And making sure that you talk about this with your IT firm, your cybersecurity partners and everything, that you have the full protection that you actually have, right? So installing Trend Microsoft on your computer, while it's a very good program, is not the only thing you can do. I think that's probably it from me today. If there's any questions in the chat.
You do have a couple more on e-invoicing.
We've got more on e-invoicing, fabulous. Any other questions on chat? I can still repeat them. Yes. Ooh. Oh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Mm. Wow. We have a scary but wonderful share in the room, which was someone was selling $1 million property, and someone had got into their system and mimicked all their stuff. So when that person selling was putting in all their info, they were actually in a fake website. Yeah, perfect. Not perfect, but I kind of want to hear if that money was recovered, but I'm scared to ask, to be honest. Oh, fabulous! It was recovered. Whew, you can all rest easy. Yeah, it's really important, and I think that's the thing to be really aware of is that there's a great saying that I didn't use today, but it's amateur cyber attackers just impersonate processes and programs, right? Very good professional ones will observe behaviors, and they'll go after you for the things you're doing and the people in your organization and how they're doing it, right? So there's some very, very good scammers out there. Unfortunately, it's really a profession. What can we say? Just before we round up, is there any more questions on e-invoicing?
Yeah, so feel free to jump back in if you'd like to as well. So we've got another one just asking, will this be mandatory for sole traders?
No. The question was, will this be mandatory for sole traders? And just the same response as before around the making things mandatory for invoicing. Yeah, so not right now.
And another one. So how does registration happen with software providers such as Xero?
Great question. Thank you. How does registration happen with software providers such as Xero? Whatever your contact process is or mechanism is with Xero, if you go to their website, if you've got a relationship manager, whatever that looks like, type in e-invoicing. You will very quickly come up with the instructions on how to register. And as I think I said before, it's about a 2 or 3 minute process. Very easy.
Just one more on the invoice. Is it worthy as a starting business, so just starting out, being an early user of invoicing, given that we probably won't have many invoices at the beginning?
Good question. So the question is, for those of you tuning in at home, is it worthwhile for me as a new to business entrepreneur, if you will, first year in business, where we're not exchanging too many invoices, is e-invoicing worth it for me? The answer is it depends. There isn't a yes or no response to that, because it depends on what is the value of those invoices and can you afford to have those funds redirected. And Roman's just taking you through the various scenarios of how that happens. And it's not necessarily a scenario of if but when. It will depend on, are you already trading with somebody who's asking you to e-invoice? That may be impetus for you to, you might win a contract because you e-invoice. You might lose a contract because you don't e-invoice. You may have improved relationships with a trading partner because you both are together championing this and being early adopters, and for your industry or whatever that looks like. You know, is there a cost to do e-invoicing? If you're using the big ones, the answer is no. It's provided as part of your subscription already. As I mentioned before, it will depend on what your business model is and what your needs are in terms of invoicing as to what product you get. So you might be using, say, Xero for something, but you may actually find that in terms of e-invoicing or everything that sits around that invoicing process, you might want a third-party plugin that works with Xero, and that is a thing. It's like an added app. It's a plugin. I think everyone understands what a plugin is.
It's your fries with your burger if your burger's your website.
That's perfect. I love it. And so, yes, it very much depends on what you want and what your needs are as to what it is you might be using. So the answer is it depends for your new starters. It depends what you need.
Well, it sounds to me if it doesn't cost anything, like you just do it.
Wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. And I want to encourage everybody too, like you've obviously heard all about e-invoicing today. It doesn't cost you to do anything. It takes 2, maybe 3 minutes to register with your bookkeeping program. As a business coach, as a mentor, as an advisor, just go do it, please. And not only do it for yourself, but remember, small business is a community. So as a task today, go and tell at least 3 businesses you know and encourage them to go do it, okay? Because it's not just about everybody who's here today. It's about making sure that you are also taking that stake in your business community and making sure they are aware of it as well, and that you encourage them to do it so that you don't have to be networking with them next month and you hear how they lost 20 grand on the invoice. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, yeah. Any quick tips on how to protect your personal information online? Don't do social media. Can I say that? I'd like to say that. So protecting your personal information online. So for example, I, as a business owner, I have the capacity to make multiple types of email addresses for my business. So I use separate email addresses to log into programs, I do client work, I do back office work, so that, for example, like I said, a phony invoice came through my email, but I'm like, well, this is not the email I used for this. So I automatically can go, well, that's not mine. Other than that, I will say that if a program that's not your bank, that doesn't legally require you to show authenticated information like birth date, things like that, if it's just a third-party program that says, can you have your birthday? It's like, sure, my birthday is like 4th of January 1921. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, just, you don't have to give your real details all the time. You can set up a menu of fake details that you can provide so that if people even get to know your behaviors and your chats and things with your listening in and whatever, they still don't know what you're putting into your programs. You also can do things like just making sure programs that you use are actually, taking cybersecurity as well. So I hear a lot of this from small business that they're like, I'm using these programs, they're safe, therefore I'm safe. So making sure that you, like I said, we're going to do a whole webinar on this in a couple of weeks, just making sure you restart your computer regularly, right? So that it can do updates, right? When you get into more significant security, it's called patch management. So it actually seeks out information, right? When you do an update on your computer, it's just all the threats and viruses and attacks that they already know about, and they've already filed and archived, which there's billions of them. But if you have live behavioral monitoring with more significant programs, then it can catch it even before it's really known to public sphere. Just making sure also that, when you get those emails through or the ads come up, like do a survey, don't do the surveys. You know what I mean? Like that Google ad that says win a smartphone, don't do that stuff, right? Does that answer your question? So how do I protect my personal information online? I'm saying use fake information and don't give it away if you don't have to, and use very, very secure original programs. Don't try and download torrent programs from various sources. Yes. Any other questions? All right, well, if there's no other questions in the room or anywhere else, then I think we're going to wrap up. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us live today and fighting the protesters, not really, to get a parking spot. And everyone on Zoom who's very patient with us as we get a little bit over time, but it was worth it, right? To do a little bit more about cybersecurity. So again, www.ato.gov.au/e-invoicing. And if you're not already part of the Digital Solutions program, please just go do it. Please just go do it. This program is only $44 and you get 3 one-hour advisory sessions. So 3 hours of direct advice about your business to do with websites, cybersecurity, social media, which is a joy in life. It doesn't suck up our whole life and time. But, you know, learning how to do these things better, right? And you also get programs like this. So webinars, workshops, all the rest, okay? So if there's nothing else, we're going to end the seminar, the webinar there. And thank you so much for joining us today. We hope we see you in the next one. Thanks, guys.